Hello, hello! This is Ethan from Pudgy Budgy, back with a new devlog for the game that I've been working on. I just reached week 3 and I wanted to get something off my chest. 2 weeks ago, I set the goal of pushing out a playable demo of this game, and well, I've more than passed that date and I still haven't done that. From everything I've read online about making games and from what I know about development, this is bad. This is really bad. Early prototyping is key to indie game development. The fact that I haven't made it to a clean, mostly working demo, considering I'm trying to make a small game, is pretty worrisome. Being in this situation, I've decided to take a step back, stop the work that I'm currently doing, and try to look at things big picture to see if I can't unjam myself from the state that I'm in. The scenario I found myself in is an almost ready game that just needs a fix or two before it's ready to be in the hands of others. Problem is, after cleaning out a dozen bugs, it still feels like it's not ready. And I want to fix that. Anything to get out of this whole 80-20 zone I'm in. 20% of the value taking 80% of the time. Next, we're going to go over how I got where I'm at, current state of the game, some things I've learned using Copilot and AI in development, and then my plan to fix only what needs fixing and get this demo out into the world. At the end of day 1, I had basically a Tetris clone set up and working. So I could go in and I could move pieces and drop them and then clear them with a quick action. Now, why I ended up going this way is because what I learned with working with ChatGPT is at the beginning, I went in and I had a different idea for my game. As far as it wasn't vertical, it was horizontal. And so you were instead going to have 2 elevators here and the front desk, and then blocks were to spawn here and walk over, because in my head I could kind of see this sideways view of a hotel lobby, and that really made sense. But what I found was that because I started asking really specific changes about, having a piece spawn on the left and move over to the right, and how it was Tetris-like, but then instead of finishing at the bottom, there were these elevators. Copilot and GPT, what it came back with was immediately wrong, over complex, and not quite what I wanted. And so what I found that I had to do was change it to first make it like Tetris, and then make the changes kind of more custom, manually, specifically, and with very, specific changes, because GPT is really good at doing what exists on the internet. And on the internet, there's a whole bunch of Tetris clones. And so when you say, hey, I want to make a Tetris board with XY, with pieces that fall at a certain speed, and there's a ghost showing where it's going to fall, and pieces stack on top of each other, and all of that, and there's a rotation, it can catch that up and do it pretty quick. And so within a day, I had this model up and working. On day 2, I worked a lot more on the visuals. Aside from just having a cue on the side to show you the next piece, I also included these new passengers. So set up shadow with colors, I got to match the current piece, and then I have them move along different markers to represent where the piece is in the grid. And so how I did that is I created a tool that basically spits out an array of markers that have numbers that associate to where a block is currently on, or where a piece is currently on the board or the grid, and it just does a mapping over. And so if it's at 0, 19, which is right. Okay, so this one right here is 0, 19, and that would associate over to this one, actually, because this is 19. It goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are blocked off, and then 6, 7, 8, 9, which are these ones over here. So as the piece moves down towards these 2 elevators, the passenger moves up into these elevators, and just kind of getting that hooked together and working. How I got the pictures themselves set up was through a few different prompts. Hooray for GPT. This screen came from Miga asking for a single screen game level, no HUD of a pixel scene, a retro game scene of a fancy hotel with big revolving doors on the left, concierge desk in the middle against the back wall, and elevators on the right. Old point-and-click perspective with carpet and bright city in windows like a fancy ritzy hotel. So this was the first image that spawned. And then I actually took that image and put it in here and said, hey, remove the lamps, bushes, couch, chair, fountain. So it's a clean carpet, just the elevators, and the elevator doors are open. It wasn't able to do that, but it did give me a close enough image, which worked pretty well. And I just brought it into Godot and worked with it. Now, day 3 is where it really started all coming together. Now, when I go in and play, there is an actual elevator and there's luggage on the passengers. I guess the positioning does work. There's some kind of odd lerping, but hey, that's fine for now. Passengers go into the elevators, click the door, they shut, passengers disappear, and the game continues. Day 4 and 5 were spent going through and updating the score manager so that there are visuals when you're clearing out the well. There was also a whack ton of refactoring used to break out a lot of the code that was specifically in board.gd and moving them into their own classes. You can see kind of the animation there. And so breaking things out into about 5 or 6 different managers for things like the well, the piece manager, score, the queue, the board, the visuals for the board, just trying to make it so that none of the classes were more than like 600 lines because it starts to get a little intimidating. For day 6, I ended up including things such as having the elevator doors when on the board itself. So if you look right here, they close. There was the scores are showing up and moving a little bit, and there are some placeholder sound effects. So really just trying to have that look and feel like a game. Here we go again. So making those numbers, having them float. There was originally an idea of having scores here and here, and so whenever like the well would close and the pieces would clear, they would just kind of float here. And then I was thinking of having them float that way, and so kind of having a way of aggregating them all and then moving them up. That being said, I didn't really, it wasn't really working, and especially when I moved over into the 3D scene, I had to do a few hacky workarounds, and so that's not how things ended up being. Now this next scene might look familiar if you watched the last devlog. Day 7 is where I went from having this scene where the pieces were working this much into a 3D scene. And so how well does this work? Well enough. It's there. I don't think, yeah, everyone's just kind of disappearing, but this was set up and close enough in a way that almost all of the scripting that was used was able to work for 3D. Actual indicators for where the point nodes are is totally off. But yeah, all I had to do was recreate the grid tool that I'd made in the 2D version to work 3D. And so it just generates a whole bunch of these positions here this way, and then added these things in. Where day 7 was all about moving from a 2D scene into a 3D scene, day 8 was about getting that really working, making sure more things were hooked up. I ended up drawing out these elevators and getting them working. If I play it, pieces don't fast fall, they just continue to move down. Fixed the animation when people are moving, and have a rotating door, which I really love the effect of. I think it's super nice and makes the space feel a lot more in and alive. Over into day 9, we ended up having elevators added into the 3D scene, which makes it feel a lot more alive. And so you press the button, doors close, and the elevator actually shifts, moves up and down. A few days earlier, added in this Max Game Jam template menu system has a few different options if one wants. You can even, go back to a menu, which does not currently work, and even right now hitting new game hooks back into the previous 2D scene instead of the 3D one. And so that is the progress that we made there. All right, on to day 10. Here's where we made it. So now there is a little bit of background music, though I end up not really liking this song and take it out. It's a free open source song that is used in a lot of places, and I just didn't find it to be right for the game. A little too slow. Rotation now for pieces has to do with the actual body position, and then there's also multiple pieces that are able to fall now. That was not the case beforehand. There's a few issues with highlighting and those types of things, and you can even see like when wells are clearing, their certain positions aren't set correct, and so it ends up kind of keeping certain pieces set up as like that kind of interstitial mid-well clear state instead of opening back up again to be free. So there was definitely, you can see more features are coming in, but I'm starting to notice some of the bugs as I'm trying to go in and add in feature after feature, trying to make this game look, act, and behave the way I intended it to. For 11 and 12, ended up working a bit more on the piece logic when they're actually inside the elevator. And so what I'm talking about is whether or not a piece gets moved up or if it gets split. And so like this long piece right here, the person itself isn't in the elevator, but the other pieces are. If we did this, that'll be another split, and there's another split there. So now when we cut it, does these pieces, they're now split. You can see there's a little bit of odd logic as far as like the highlighting, and in fact there's actually also a straggler piece, which is interesting because if I look at some recent issue that I was having like a day ago, it's the same piece. And so here it is, day 12, this bug has been introduced, and yeah, like a week later, I've still been dealing with it. And so even just kind of provides a little insight of this is kind of where the logic was added that puts on this odd behavior. Oh, while we're at it, also here I've got a debug menu that I put in to kind of help out with these types of things. You can see right there, I was trying to figure out what is going on. And if I look, there's a 2 there, and there are these 2 blocks here. So those 2 blocks are these ones here. The highlight doesn't actually know that it's being split, and so that's just displaying there. That can be ignored for now. That's just a quick little change. And then for some odd reason, this 2 block remained there while not being affected by the gravity when the pieces below it shifted. And yeah, just kind of dealing with that, which to be honest, the reason is that it's not listed here in all of these pieces, and that's something that I've dealt with and we'll deal with. On over to day 13, we were working on the piece queue, so actually displaying what pieces are going to be showing up next. There are additional pieces that were added in. So this one is here. It's basically different 3 blocks. Everything so far has been typical Tetris tetraminos, and because of the layout felt right to add in smaller pieces, and so there's even 1x2 that gets added in. Also was working at updating how pieces are split and how those have relationships to the passenger and the luggage. And so you can see there's like a duplicate. Those are some of the issues that we're trying to fix because it is not entirely consistent. And so, yeah, there's just a bunch of time kind of spent debugging that and trying to make it right. So that passenger disappeared, and those luggage don't actually have associated. Oh, they do have associated pieces. Either way, things are not entirely consistent when it comes to splitting based off of elevators, and so I was working in trying to fix that. Day 14 was a big push in order to make the game a lot more dimmable. So have an actual startup with a background here. If you click into new game, there is an option drop down to pick different difficulties that are not entirely set up. And then there's an option to choose what type of pieces show up. And so this is for kind of being able to play through and see what works and what doesn't work. The hope here is you can go through, figure out what settings are nice, and then for me to go through and kind of be able to set up different levels. And so having like a level 1 to 10 and picking different rarities of the types of pieces that show up. And then you can see here, these ones were more often, and so you can see more of them showing up. Yeah, that was most of this day, just trying to get that interface up and working. On day 16, I went in and added in some generated music. I also spent a bunch of time trying to go through and fix the lerping of different of the pieces and the passengers. And so one of the challenges that I had using Copilot is that I would go through and get a feature up and working, and then because it's just like a small code base with no tests, I would find that certain behavior would be lost after a while. And so the behavior of the pieces actually lerping and moving down slowly versus just ticking on to the next grid was changed at some point. And so, yeah, this kind of kicks off into full force a lot more dev time kind of spent going in and a bit more on the refactoring side and trying to fix kind of these deep nested specific edge cases where it looks fine, it's good, and then I'll go through and run certain like test instances where I create a bunch of pieces and try allowing certain blocks to be split in that, and sometimes it works, other times it doesn't. So you can see right there, even like the highlighted piece was locked into the grid, and then you were able to move it. And so it's just kind of that type of behavior where what's going on here actually is it's the checks for what things are and aren't falling isn't properly being set, and so all of these pieces think that they're falling right now. I don't actually throw this in the debugger. I'll do that later. It's so nice talking about code in the past. And but basically that type of behavior is causing all types of other issues as far as not doing different checks and that flow. And so yeah, just kind of dealing with the challenges of the added complexity that generated code adds into a code base. No update for day 17. Over on to day 18, I have more options when you set up the level, so you can pick how quickly pieces fall. This is basically your tick speed, really sets the difficulty of the level, and then how quickly new pieces spawn in. And bottom option doesn't actually do anything yet. And so it definitely makes a difference as far as how quickly pieces are moving down the grid. With this day was also spending a bunch of time trying to figure out different kind of issues with cutting pieces, right? So right here, this piece got cut, and oh, the passenger did exist. There are definitely cases of that not working out. And then also doing the logic for moving a piece upward, and you can see, yeah, like, so there's issues there. What I also worked on that I really like is these elevator buttons. So when I hold down X, this button presses. When I hold down Z, that button lights up, and it indicates the elevator actually moving. It fits really well. I was happy with that. And that brings us to day 19, which is the final day before going through and recording this video. Here I have updated the game itself to include a whole bunch of different sound effects. So when you rotate a piece, when it drops, some pretty classic Tetris noises when the door itself opens, which I find is really nice, makes that feel a lot more real. When an elevator closes, I've updated the default sounds to be different. There, making noises when it comes back in. So this might be a little loud. We'll see how the mixing is. Hopefully it's all right. Here we go. There's a full elevator. We'll hear this now. There we go. It even had, so the final ding is supposed to be there for 50 extra points if you have a completely full elevator. It's mostly good. Why this one has not been set up and is demoable is there are still a few different specific issues happening with the luggage and the splitting. And so that's been where a lot of that behavior is. You saw right there, I did that split, and in fact, it created a passenger, it created a piece of luggage, which was a param. Ooh, let me turn that off. In the wrong position. It actually made it right here in the well because there was a wrong offset to it. And so a random piece of luggage shows up here and then moves up with the elevator because it is added on. And so just like some weird behavior there that has got to go through and be fixed. But that's not really the blocking behavior. The main issue and why this still doesn't quite feel demoable to me is that when I'm playing it, we'll go in and we'll just lower the music so we can talk through this a little bit. There are enough kind of odd, weird cases, and every once in a while still seeing problems with the pushing up logic and the splitting logic not working exactly. So if I go through and open up a quick debug setup, if I cut this one, it should be fine. You'll see that's one piece of luggage that got split. There's a weird kind of slower falling thing that's happening there. And I think over here on this side, this one green piece is going to detach. Oh, hey, no, it didn't. Great. So that was fixed. That's right. That is actually, I think, what like the day of, like what this day was spent doing was fixing that. But there are still a few other smaller kind of edge cases as far as pieces moving each other and causing like stagnant pieces to not move, which creates a blocker and is really not fun and sucks for the game to just kind of break that way and not do anything. So we are still trying to fix that. Will this one do it? Yeah, there it was, right? So because this piece moved, it created these two additional, here we can zoom in, right? So these two pieces here are these two pieces here. It got pushed, the positions weren't set quite correctly, it became detached from the piece itself, and then now this well is never going to fill, the whole thing will fill up, and then you'll lose because you can't place down another piece, even though you shouldn't have. And so that's the big issue. That's what I'm trying to fix and solve before this kind of is able to be a demo. So what's my plan on getting this game done? It's simple. I'm going to go in, and this is my editor. Now usually I'll have kind of information out here on this side. I'll have two different info panels up, and then there's been this ChatGPT stream kind of helping me out, generating a bunch of code, fixing a lot of problems, putting in a bunch of bugs. That's what it's been doing. But as of today, I'm going to go in and I'm going to be keeping an additional tab open at the bottom of my second editor, which is my to-do list. On there, it will have the main fixes that I should be making, and then optional fixes that I could be putting in. And to be honest, passenger luggage on splitting, it's probably going to be going down here. All I'm going to be trying to fix is pieces in some rotations are visually splitting but are having issues with collision. Anything wrong with collision is pretty awful to have in a game because it feels really bad when things don't work right that way. And the other thing is this splitting piece causing straggler issues that I was showing before. My plan is to go in, execute, destroy those two bugs, and have something out very shortly. Thanks a lot, and I appreciate you, and we'll talk to you later. To the next one.